EU and US Special Envoys to the Horn had visited the capital of Tigray, Mekelle, yesterday. In their joint statement on their visit, they said that both parties agreed on mediation of African Union. Does that mean the government of Tigray neglected its prior position for Kenya-US-led process? The statement hasn't also raised the issue of Western Tigray and the issue of Eritrean government. Wasn't that the issue of your discussion? And over the past weeks, your government has issued multiple statements regarding thousands of Tigrayans arbitrarily detained and being held in dismal conditions in internment camps across the country, including in neighbor Afar state. What is your government doing to secure their release? Is there a possibility that they may be part of the negotiation process? Last week, commissioners from the investigative team established by the UN made their first visit to Addis Ababa. Is the commission what your government had hoped for in terms of mandate and scope? You have already said concerns about the possibility of the investigative team taking notes of the joint investigation conducted by state-appointed Ethiopian Human Rights Commission and the US Higher Commissioner for Human Rights. And an online portal was created by the commission to allow individuals or groups to submit evidence of atrocities in Tigray. This could obviously impact the finding of the investigation in light of ongoing communication blackout in Tigray, but your government is yet to issue any statement. Have you perhaps had the chance to privately communicate with the commissioners on the issue? And your government has said that it has established a high-level committee to cooperate with the UN investigative team. Could you tell us more about this committee, its mandate, and if it has already started communication with the investigative commission? And my final question is, last week Tigrayan athletes won 3 gold medals at Oregon Athletics Championship. Many of them have lived through the conflict and have not been able to reach out their family members for at least a year. Did you watch the races? How did you feel to watch the Tigrayan athletes succeed in the international stage?
Yes, as you know, the delegation led by EU Special Envoy Annette Weber visited Mekelle yesterday. We have had constant communications with representatives of governments and the Special Envoys, who obviously are worried that the impasse that characterize the relations between Tigray and the central government would end up in some sort of conflagration. And they have been doing everything in their power to bring the two parties to a negotiating table. So we have long expressed our readiness to address whatever differences we have with central authorities peacefully, because ultimately every political problem needs and should be resolved, politically. This is a long-standing position on our part, and it is also common knowledge that the authorities in Addis, the Abiy Ahmed government, has since recently been expressing readiness to negotiate with Tigray. And we have a number of issues here. We know that there is a propensity on the part of the authorities in Addis Ababa to address every difference militarily. It didn't work the first time around. There is no reason for them or for the rest of the world to believe that it's going to work this time around. So we have insisted that the only game in town is talking, because its alternative, shooting, will have disastrous consequences, especially at this stage where the country is in what appears to be an interminable chaos and crisis. another conflagration of the kind of the magnitude that our engagement would take on, if indeed it happens, would further precipitate the disintegration of the country. Although most of the job to dismember the country has already been done superbly by the authorities in Addis Ababa and their partners in crime, the Eritreans and the Amhara expansionist forces. So to the extent that there is a possibility of averting a terminal crisis, a terminal disintegration of the country, we believe there is to be a readiness on the part of the two parties to come together and resolve their differences peacefully. So these people, part of the delegation that visited Mekelle yesterday, have for a long time been involved in addressing this problem. Although we know they have the best of intentions, we also know that there have been limitations with regard to what they have been doing and with regard to exerting the kind of influence they should have and could have exerted in order to bring pressure to bear on Abiy Ahmed and his government to abandon the avenue of war entirely. So it was a follow-up of our continuous engagement. These people have been denied travel permits to come to Tigray for a long time. It is kind of ironic that the Abiy Ahmed government, which has been especially of late waxing lyrical about its credentials for peace, has denied European, American, African, UN diplomats and special envoys who are very much invested in the idea of negotiations and peace in the region. So it was welcome news for us. There was a confusion, especially following some of the smart alecky remarks by Addis authorities. There was a confusion that probably the ball was in our court, that we were the ones who were standing in the way of peaceful resolution to the conflict. So we've been consistent to a fault when it comes to addressing this crisis peacefully. And it is the authorities in Addis who have been using every means at their disposal to cow our people into submission. Of course, the most vicious one is the use of hunger, the use of food aid as a weapon of war. And the international community has been putting pressure to a certain extent. And as you know, following the cessation of hostilities back in March and early April, the humanitarian access issue has been showing a marked improvement. But unfortunately, the international community seems to fall for the tricks of the Addis government, in the sense that what they consider improvement is increasing the number of trucks. For us, ensuring unfettered humanitarian access is not about the number of trucks that are being allowed to come to Tigray. More importantly, it's about putting in place a system that ensures that the movement of trucks and the access to food is not going to be subject to the capricious decisions of bureaucrats or unnecessary checkpoints that are erected overnight here and there. So and of course, there was also this hope and expectation that with those smart alecky moves by the authorities in Addis, that they are the ones who are ready for peace, while we are standing in the way of peace. And then we really needed to take the opportunity to explain ourselves and where we come from when it comes to the peaceful settlement of this dispute. So it was a very welcome development for us that these people who have for a long time been invested in the whole idea of resolving this conflict peacefully to come to Mekelle and hear our side of the story. And second, even if they were not in a position to bring their pressure to bear on Abiy Ahmed and his government to really be genuinely interested in peace, at least they would be in a position to understand our side of the story. And they would know who is to blame for the lack of progress, rather than engaging in some kind of shadow boxing where the claims by the authorities in Addis would be taken at face value, and the lack of communication on our part, for obvious reasons, or the lack of communications on our part because we lack the communication, the medium of communication, but more importantly because we are constrained and hamstrung by the fact that we're not necessarily the kind of international players that would be invited at will to explain their positions in international forums. Okay, so we have to take this opportunity to explain our position. If possible, we'll use this opportunity to convince our partners. These are our partners for peace, our partners for humanitarian issues, our partners for human rights investigation issues, our partners on a number of issues. So if we can convince them to bring pressure to bear on Abiy's government to really be genuinely interested in peace, that would be the icing on the cake. But at the very least, we would be in a position to explain our position to such an extent that the rest of the world would understand where we are coming from, that we're not the ones who are standing in the way of peace, that we have been doing everything within our power to make sure that this difference is resolved peacefully. So we took the opportunity. So we raised a number of issues. Humanitarian access issue is one area we discussed. And of course, we've explained to them that the international community is giving the wrong signal to the authorities in Addis Ababa by praising them to the skies for improvement in humanitarian access. For one thing, humanitarian access, hampering humanitarian access issue should be punished. I mean, you have this rather ironic condition where the government keeps obstructing the flow of aid for 3 months, 5 months, 6 months, and then all of a sudden it wakes up one bright Monday morning and declares that it has the best of intentions to the people of Tigray, and then it will allow some trucks. It could be 17 trucks, could be 27 trucks. It is a far cry from the kind of the kind of challenge that we are facing. But the fact that even 17 trucks after 6 months of obstruction have been allowed to cross Tigray border simply becomes a very welcome news on the part of the international community. That's a travesty, because a government that should have been punished for not doing, for obstructing humanitarian access, which is an international crime, would be welcomed for relenting on its chokehold simply because it has allowed 17 or 27 trucks. This is a travesty. But what we explained to them is that improvement is not just about increasing the number of trucks. We appreciate the fact that the number of trucks has been on the increase, although to a certain extent there was a slowdown in July. At least in June, we know about 2,500 trucks were able to make it to Tigray's borders. While that itself is good news, it's not good enough news, because the authorities in Addis Ababa are now withholding fuel, which is much needed to distribute food from the warehouses in Mekelle to the needy. So if you have food in the warehouses in Mekelle, but we are not in a position to distribute them to those who need it in Samra, there is no point of ensuring, there is no reason why you can say unfettered humanitarian access is ensured. This is one area we did discuss. And they understand. They even think this is an issue they take very seriously. This is an issue they often try to take stock of when they deal with authorities in Addis Ababa, and that they have been involved. We understand they have been involved. We sort of have reservations about the amount of pressure they exert, but still, it's good that they remain engaged. It's good that they try to do everything with their power for this humanitarian crisis to be resolved in a manner that would address the needs and the demands of our people. Second area we discussed was the issue of services. Services, we both agree, cannot be conditions for negotiations. It's an absolute obligation of any government worth its name to provide services to its people. Whether the government in Addis Ababa considers Tigray its people is an entirely different matter, because if the past is any guide, they have been using every means at their disposal to starve the people of Tigray into submission. If they say there is a change of heart, would hope that change of heart to be evidenced by the flow of aid and, of course, the provision of services. This is one area discussed. But despite protestations otherwise, despite promises to open up, despite promises to restore telecom, transport, electricity, whatever services, and of course we have been asked to furnish guarantee for technical experts who would come and help in opening banks. And we've been giving that guarantee for a long time now. Of course, this is another area we discussed. And we were also asked if we were willing to furnish that guarantee in writing, that we'd be willing to cooperate with any technical team. We've told them it's a rather sick joke to complain that the government of Tigray would throw banking experts to jail who would be in the business of opening banks, would address the bread and butter issues of tens of thousands of Tagaro. Why would the government of Tigray be in the business of standing in the way of telecom technicians would help kickstarting telecom services? Why would we stand in the way of technical experts who come here to hook the electricity, whatever, the power transmission lines to the national grid? Well, now that people we respect, people who we take seriously, come here and ask us to give a written guarantee that we would cooperate with technical experts, although we know this is one of the flimsiest excuses to come up with for Abiy's government to renege on its promise to restore services. We have, however, agreed in the hope that the UN, the US government, and the European Union and other partners would help in monitoring the implementation of such a promise. Whether that happens would remain to be seen, but it doesn't require a huge amount of time or a huge amount of infrastructural adjustment to make it happen. It's a matter of a couple of days or a little longer. So we hope and expect something will come out of it, but it remains to be seen. That's another area. Third area is a question of Western Tigray, and in very we did discuss this in a very candid manner. We told them the issue of Western Tigray is not about Tigray reasserting its control over its own territory. That's one thing. That's constitutionally guaranteed right, and the status quo needs to be restored. But the most important concern we told them is, unless the question of Western Tigray is resolved in a manner that restores the status quo, that restores administration, Tigray administration, that chastise the Amhara authorities, the federal authorities, and their Eritrean partners to undo what they have achieved by force. And then that would amount to writing a prescription for national disintegration, because, you know, once you allow the Amhara expansionists to get away with their banditry in Western Tigray, it simply means it would encourage those of us who have the means in our disposal to take the law into our own hands. Tigray will be twice as big, considering the territorial size it had before 1991. Amhara have claims over Benishangul. They have claims over Oromia. They have claims over Afar. They have claims literally I mean, they have claims over Sudan. So to allow them to get away with Western Tigray is to encourage them to go ahead with their strident, extremist, nationalist, irredentist agenda. That would spell disaster to Ethiopia as we know it. So to the extent that the special envoys and the representatives of these important countries are worried about the continuity of the Ethiopian state, they should pay enough attention to what transpires in Western Tigray, because whatever happens in Western Tigray will determine the fate of the country. Whether we are going to settle for some sort of legal arrangement or whether we'll be forced to take the law into our hands is the difference between total disintegration of the country or the existence of a possibility of salvaging the Ethiopian state. So we explain our position. And it is our hope and expectation that our partners understand where we are coming from on this area, on this issue. Well, another issue raised with our partners, our visitors, was the question of Eritrea's role in complicating the already complex crisis in this country. As you know, the Eritreans were invited to destroy infrastructure in Tigray. They were invited by the authorities in Addis Ababa, by Abiy Ahmed's government, to destroy infrastructure, to wreak havoc throughout Tigray, to kill and maim tens of thousands. They have an old score to even with TPLF, with Tigray government, with the people of Tigray. They had a declared intention to destroy everything Tigray. And they were invited. And I'm not going to give you a laundry list of the things they have done, the heinous crimes they have committed in Tigray. They still are, well, the international community still thinks Abiy was serious when he said he has told the Eritreans to leave Western Tigray. We know for a fact they are back in Western Tigray. We know for a fact they are in northwestern part of Tigray. They are in northeastern part of Tigray, parts of Europe. If there indeed is a sincere belief that Abiy is really interested in peace, it simply means that the Eritreans and their Amhara junior partners are trying to sabotage his overtures for peace, okay? Assuming that he is interested in peace. I have doubts, but that's secondary, because some of them think that he is serious about. Although his disappearance has made it difficult to really check once again if he still sticks to his old position. But the point is, if indeed the Eritreans are doing this at his behest, it simply means that whatever facade of difference they have been displaying doesn't exist, that they are still working in cahoots and they are trying to reignite another chapter of invasion where they would probably be in a position to finish off Tigray. We know they have the intentions. It's one thing to have the intentions, but it's entirely different to have the capabilities. But we know Isaias has a declared intention to destroy not just TPLF and the government of Tigray, but also everything Tigray. It's not an overstatement. They say it in public. Isaias brags about his intentions to carry out some sort of political cleansing that will rid Ethiopia of the legacies of the Tigrayans, whatever that legacy is, including, of course, federalism. He blames everything on us, and federalism even more so. The fate of Eritreans has been in the hands of this Wako for more than 60 years now, and he has everyone to blame for the problems that have bedeviled Eritrea, but himself. I would have thought he is the one to blame for everything that's gone wrong. Well, it's not for me to blame squarely, to blame Isaias or whatever squarely for whatever has happened in Eritrea. But as far as we're concerned, it is not us who should be blamed for that. But he wants us to even an old score, and he wants to do that. He still continues to arm the Afar elements in Afar, elements in Amhara, even some so-called Tigrayan elements there. He is making. So if Abiy is really seriously interested in peace, all he has to do is to call on Eritreans to withdraw from sovereign Ethiopian territory, because Tigray territory technically is sovereign Ethiopian territory. We don't expect Abiy to use force to liberate our land. That we are in a position to take care of. But at least if there is a genuine interest for peace, it behooves Abiy's government to come out in public and say Eritreans should leave sovereign Ethiopian territory. That would suffice. That's an area, this was another topic we raised. And there is a clear understanding, obviously, that they realize the rather negative role Eritreans are playing here. Eritrea has always showed a very precocious talent for trouble making. At the age of 3, Eritrea had gone to war with most of its neighbors. So at 33, it has gone to war with the rest of the world, the entire world. So it appears some of them have given up hope on the very possibility of influencing Eritreans to change their way, influencing Isaias to change their way. So we're not worried that lack of support by Abiy or lack of support by Europe or America is going to make our efforts to liberate Tigray more difficult. What we are concerned here, if the authorities in Addis are sincere about peace, at least they have to come out in public and call on the Eritreans to leave. That's the fairest demand one can make under circumstances. The rest we can take care of. The fifth point Debretsion raised is with regard to the UN investigation on human rights abuse. As you know, the so-called joint investigation by the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights and the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission, which is a bureaucratic appendage of the government, mostly engaged in whitewashing the crimes of Abiy Ahmed. And we have written a detailed rebuttal of how unacceptable its conclusions are, its findings are. And no self-respecting country has found the report any more valuable than the paper it's written on. But for whatever it's worth, people can use it as a reference, at least to teach their students how bad such reports can be written. Otherwise, Abiy's government from the get-go was opposed to the establishment of this independent investigation committee of experts on the grounds that the investigation had already been done, an investigation which whitewashed the crimes that the authorities in Addis Ababa had committed for well over a year. And now they have relented in the hope that they could convince the newly established committee investigation team to focus their investigation on events that have unfolded after the 28th of June, which is the liberation of Mekelle. So what the smart Alex in Addis Ababa are trying to do is to rewrite the mandate of the new UN investigation panel to only focus on Amhara and Tigray, where our forces are supposed to have committed crimes. Our forces have never committed systematic crimes. To the extent that there have been cases, transgressions of law, it could very well be isolated ones, because our forces are motivated in large part by the need to neutralize the threat that is posed against their people. Even today, industrial parks that became operational 4 days after we withdrew from Kombolcha are a testament to the kind of disciplined treatment that our forces had under circumstances. We cannot vouch for every individual fighter who might have been involved in this or that kind of unwholesome activity, but we know for a fact there was no systematic attack whatsoever that characterized the Tigray Defense Forces. But even so, we have repeatedly committed ourselves to independent investigation. Now, the Mekelle company are trying to rewrite the rule books for the investigation team in the hope that they would incriminate us, but getting away scot-free. So that would compromise the integrity of the team. And in fact, they were supposed to come to Tigray. They had written a letter asking for an appointment with the President Debretsion. We have expressed a willingness to see them because it would be in our best interest. If justice is going to be served, their presence would be very, very crucial. Apparently, they were told they were not welcome. We don't exactly know what happened in closed quarters with the authorities in Addis Ababa. But if the deadline they put for an online registration of complaints is any guide, it is very difficult to take what they are doing seriously. Tigray has been under de facto blockade for more than 19 months now, 20 months now. There is no internet communication, there is no telecoms, there is no electricity, there is no nothing, transport. And of course, the fact that the Mekelle told them they're not allowed to go to Tigray simply shows how severe the blockade is. What little internet services there are limited to certain areas. And to expect a largely rural population to come and submit their cases online, that would be a travesty of justice. It's very unfortunate, and I'm assuming there is some logic to it, but I have difficulty seeing what logic that could be. But the point is, this was one area we discussed with the team. My understanding is that they clearly see our point of view. There are areas we feel strongly about that they do not necessarily feel strongly about, but they still sympathize. There are also areas which they feel strongly about, but we have difficulty sympathizing with. We don't have difficulty sympathizing with, but we do not necessarily feel strongly about. So it's obviously we have reached a point where we understand each other in more ways than one. I would say we are in agreement in most of the cases to a degree or another. At the very least, the two areas, the humanitarian access issue and services issue, we see eye to eye on those issues. Whether their statement was supposed to reflect Eritrea and Western Tigray is entirely their choice, but our understanding and the commitment they made is that they raise those issues with the authorities in Addis Ababa and to see if they should be allowed, this should be allowed to serve as, allowed to continue as hurdles for peace, against peace. So we have made our point. And it's our understanding that they have really understood our point. They support most, if not all, of our points. But that's besides the point. My burden of responsibility is to explain my side of the story and to make it as easily palatable as possible. And we have reason to believe that Debretsion has made a very good case of explaining Tigray's position, the kind of situation we find ourselves in, the depths and the magnitude of the humanitarian crisis we are facing, and the fact that we are working under pressure, that questions are being asked by our people, by the army. How long are we going to stay suspended?